second grade scientists. It's Miss Haversick, and we're back with our good friend, biologist Blake.
Good to see you, class.
Now, Blake is a biologist. That means he's an expert on living things. We have been learning so much about living things. We know living things grow and reproduce. Living things need their 4 basic needs, and living things have a life cycle that repeats over and over. That's what biologist Blake talked with us about last time. Now today, we're going to continue talking about adaptations. Adaptations, that's that fancy word that means characteristics of living things that help them to stay alive in their environments. So we're looking at how living things have adapted, how they have changed, how they've adjusted so that they can survive in their environments. Yesterday, our good friend, conservationist Camille, she told us all about how plants adapt. We saw some plants need a lot more water than others, and some have adapted to barely need any. Some plants need a lot of sunlight, and some don't need much at all. All of them are plants, but they have special adaptations that help them to survive in their environments. Now, biologist Blake, can you tell us, do other living things have adaptations too?
Indeed, they do, Miss Haversick. A lot of animals actually on our terrestrial planet have many adaptations, including us as humans.
Whoa, biologist Blake, that's so cool. So there are other living things, lots of animals that have adaptations that help them to survive in their environments?
Correct. Many adaptations, depending on the environment.
Wow, can you tell us about some of them?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I guess a good example to start off with here would be our buddy. His name is Bruce. He is a bearded dragon. I understand that one of you actually has one, so congratulations. You have a very cool pet. So Bruce here is known in Australia as one of the bearded dragon types that exist. They typically get about this large in their adult years. And some of the adaptations that they have is actually this hard, scaly exterior that looks really prickly and pointy, but don't worry, it's not like a cactus. It's not going to hurt you that much. You know, it's definitely just a little bit sharp, but they're actually mostly soft. This is mostly to deter predators. That's one such adaptation they serve.
Oh, so you're telling me that Bruce here, he has an adaptation that helps to keep him safe.
Correct.
Oh, that is so cool.
Oh, yeah.
Does Bruce the bearded dragon have any other adaptations?
He does. So a good one would be his skin itself. It's actually designed to retain moisture because in the desert, there's little to no water. So if he gets dehydrated, he could dry out and die, just kind of like how a plant dries out when it's dead. So if that happens to him, it's not very good, which is why he needs to keep this dry, scaly skin as opposed to us as humans who have very nice, soft, moist skin.
Wow. Yeah, so Bruce doesn't have fur or the same type of skin that we have. He has this dry, hard scales. And biologist Blake is telling us that that's an adaptation that Bruce has because Bruce's natural environment is a super hot, dry desert. He needs this special skin to stay alive. It keeps the water in, and we know water is one of our 4 basic needs. Wow, can you tell us any other cool things about Bruce?
I sure can. So for one thing, his eyes are designed to see a lot better than humans can. So he can see a lot more movement and a lot more subtle, like an insect. He can see the antenna move from a lot farther away than we can as humans, because that's naturally how he's survived all these years. He needs to be able to see those just minute, small movements in order to see his prey. Another good one are his ears. So they're actually very unique. They're not designed like human ears. You can see here, they're actually these holes in the side of his head. These are actually his tympanic membranes. So the reason why he doesn't have an external ear is because it's actually kind of not really too good for him to have a lot of things that stick out, especially when he's in a competitive environment that could risk like losing certain limbs and stuff like that. So these pits
very compact.
Exactly. These pits that he has allow him to hear. And
Wow.
yeah, it's pretty much just like a basic normal ear. It's just slightly different, and it's designed to keep anything from going into his head, like say grains of sand.
Right,
anything
because
like that.
that's his natural environment. He lives where there's a lot of sand. He doesn't want to get his ears clogged with sand.
Exactly. There's a tiny film that if you look really close, you can see. It looks kind of like somebody put a piece of Scotch tape over the top of the hole.
Bruce, you are so cool.
It is.
That is amazing. So this one animal has so many adaptations.
So many mishaps.
That is amazing. Biologist Blake, can you tell us about some other adaptations in other animals?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So another good one is actually in ourselves, the human. So one such is actually our hair. So if you notice, we don't really have a lot of fur like most other mammals do. It's mostly on our heads. And the reason why we don't have this much hair is that so we can regulate our temperature to keep homeostasis. If we get too hot, we can overheat and we can die. The same thing can happen if we get too cold. So the reason why we have this kind of hair is actually it's because since we sweat so much and generate so much body heat, we don't want to have a lot of fur to like keep that heat in. That's why we keep it out by having sweat glands and when your hair stands up, that kind of thing. When you're cold, that's actually a response to you being cold, so that way you keep more heat inside. The hair standing up acts like fur.
So humans even have adaptations that help us to survive in our environments.
Correct. Like when your hand gets all pruny after putting it in a lot of water, that's actually giving you extra grip while you're underneath the water.
Whoa, that is so cool. And biologists, like when we're talking about this, I'm thinking about like so many other adaptations of animals like bears. Like they sleep during the winter. They hibernate. They store up on a lot of food, and since it gets so cold and it's hard to get food when it's cold, they sleep all winter long. So that's an adaptation.
Yes, it is.
And oh my goodness, biologists, like those chameleons, I love how they blend into their environment.
Yes, they're actually closely related to Bruce here.
Oh, so that's an adaptation because it keeps them safe.
Right.
Wow.
And there's another such adaptation that's actually very similar to the chameleon, which is known as mimicry. And you can see that in some insects and other animals that actually have developed parts of their body, like appendages, that'll look like natural predators. That way they deter other species. So you can have things like geckos, or a really good one is actually moths. They actually have a design where if they open up their wings, they have these two giant dots on the back.
I've seen that
exactly.
before.
They look like a pair of eyes, which usually scares off any predators like a bird or something like that. That thinks it's an owl.
Second grade scientists, this is so very cool. Did you know that living things had so many adaptations? I sure didn't. Thank you so much for your help, biologist Blake.
Of course, Miss Haverstick, anytime. Thank you so much, class.
We love using teamwork because when we get together with our community helpers like biologist Blake, we get to learn so many amazing things. And today we saw how living things like us, living things like Bruce here, we all have adaptations. Those characteristics of living things that help them to stay alive in their environments. Because the environment is changing, there are so many different places that animals and plants and people live. Living things adapt so that they can stay alive. They adapt so they can still get their 4 basic needs, so that they can still grow and reproduce and go through their life cycles. So cool. Now, class, it's your turn to look at adaptations. After you finish watching this video, click on your Google Classroom assignment. It's up to you to drag the pictures of different living things, different animals, into the boxes that describe different kinds of adaptations. Think back to everything we talked about here and use those curious scientist brains to figure out how these different animals have adapted. Biologist Blake, this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miss Haverstick. Thank you again, class.
And thanks, Bruce. Let's give them a round of applause. I'll see you again tomorrow, second grade scientists.